I'm Alex Michaelson. This week, the issue is gun control. California already has some of the strictest gun control measures in the nation. Do there need to be more gun control measures in this state?
I think so, and I think
We talk one-on-one with Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, about what new measures he wants to see here. Plus, Senator, what's your human reaction just to walking on Skid Row, to seeing what's here?
It is painful.
We tour L.A. Skid Row with Senator Bernie Sanders and debate the issue of homelessness. That and more with our panel, Stuttering John, Melendez, Areva Martin, and John Thomas. The issue is starts right now. And welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Alex Michaelson. The cover of Time magazine this week is pretty profound. The word enough and the names of all the cities that have experienced mass shootings this year alone. The issue is, will anything actually change this time? As the country mourns, it also fiercely debates what to do about guns. President Trump says during his visits to Texas and Ohio, first responders and victims asked him for action.
telling me, let's see if we can get something done. And Republicans want to do it and Democrats want to do it.
Democrats want Senator Mitch McConnell to bring the Senate back into session and pass a background check bill already passed by the House. So far, McConnell has refused.
It's becoming increasingly difficult to say the same thing over and over again.
We spoke with California Congresswoman Katie Hill. We see this cycle over and over again. There's a shooting. Democrats call for gun control. Republicans say there needs to be something done about mental health. A few days go by, and then nothing happens. We wait a few weeks, maybe a few days. There's another shooting. We do it again. How does that ever change? How do you break the cycle?
If I can be totally honest with you, we have to put the pressure on the people who are stopping something from happening. So, frankly, we've got to vote Mitch McConnell out. And the only way that that's going to happen, either he changes his behavior through public pressure or he gets voted out.
Enough! Enough!
The issue dominating the presidential race.
We must require federal licensing for guns in America. It is a common sense policy.
In the sale of assault weapons, weapons of war.
It's not like we don't know what to do. We need universal background checks. Hello?
This week, a man was arrested after threatening to attack Senator Bernie Sanders' rally in Long Beach. I asked the senator about the climate in this country.
We have a president of the United States that gives me no pleasure to say it, but is somebody who is a racist, who is a sexist, who is a xenophobe, whose anti-immigrant rhetoric, I believe, creates a climate in which violence can take place.
Governor Gavin Newsom told me because of the paralysis in Washington, California will largely have to act on its own. Newsom wants to expand so-called red flag laws, which allow people to petition to take away others' guns if they're a danger to themselves or society.
California wants to lead. We led on the red flag laws as they are today, and I think we could do more, and we can make it more comprehensive.
You just heard from Governor Newsom there. We spent several days with him this week discussing a variety of issues. On Thursday, we're at an early child education center in downtown LA talking about more state funding for that. On Wednesday, we were at a legal aid clinic in LA's Koreatown neighborhood talking about more funding for that. Afterwards, we spoke to him in an exclusive one-on-one interview. Governor, welcome back to The Issue Is.
Yeah, no, good to be with you.
So this week, the biggest issue of the week for so many people is gun violence.
Yeah.
California already has some of the strictest gun control measures in the nation. Do there need to be more gun control measures in this state?
I think so, and I think we're looking at least a dozen new bills that will likely end up on my desk in the next few weeks. But here's a couple points that need to be made. We passed some of the most progressive gun laws a couple years ago, and the National Rifle Association and their affiliates have sued. I'll give you one example. Large capacity magazine clips. They're illegal to possess in the state of California. National Rifle Association, their affiliates sued, and that's currently pending in the courts. Background checks on ammunition first state in the country to do that. Last month, over 100 people were rejected from getting ammunition because of those background checks. Now the NRA and their affiliates are suing to stop it. So my only point is here is one thing to pass a law, it's another to implement it because of the arguments from the other side that constantly need to be batted down.
And of course, one of those arguments you hear over and over again is like in Chicago, there's more gun control than anywhere else and there's still more murders. What do you say to people who say that gun control as a concept doesn't work?
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting. They never talk about California. They never talk about Massachusetts. They talk about a small city. They never talk about states at scale that have passed progressive gun safety laws that have reduced the gun murder rate faster than the rest of the national average. Gun safety, gun control measures save lives. It's a fact, and the data bears that out. Chicago is a whole different isolated challenge. Their arguments are weaker and weaker every day.
Speaking of lawsuits, there's this lawsuit going on now with the Trump administration suing you in California over this idea of tax returns. Yeah. You think that the president should release them to get on the ballot. They say that it's not constitutional because that's not a requirement in the Constitution. Yeah. Where constitutionally is that a requirement, though?
Well, the fact is we have some of the top constitutional lawyers in the United States of America, four that were willing to put their name to our bill, and that was David Boies, Ted Boutros, the head of Berkeley, Dean of Berkeley Law, among others, Lawrence Tribe of Harvard, some of the top constitutional lawyers that just completely reject the president's point of view. This could be addressed tomorrow. Just release your tax returns as you promised, Mr. President. And it's also, by the way, true of this law, requires me as governor to release those tax returns. And you know what? You have a right to know. You have a right to know if the chief executive officer of the state of California is monetizing his business interests. I have 23 businesses. You have a right to know a lot of information about that. The President of the United States has hundreds more. We have the right to know.
So what happens if he doesn't do it?
He has the right to do that. He has the right not to, and we'll see him in court.
What you're doing here today is talking about the issue of housing and homelessness, which you've described as the most vexing challenge that you face. You're giving $331 million to different nonprofits for legal aid. That's what you're announcing here today. But just across the way, we see tents. We see so many tents. I was yesterday on Skid Row with Bernie Sanders walking through some of the tents. For people that are frustrated that this isn't moving fast enough, or just frustrated to see that in their communities, what do you say to the people of California?
I think people have the right to be outraged. If you're not expressing outrage, then I don't think you're paying attention to what's going on all across the state. Look, I got here 7 months ago, and those counts that obviously saw a big increase occurred the day I got sworn in. I'm not suggesting I don't have accountability or responsibility. I'm just saying I get it, and I want to get something done. We put $1 billion investment, but we focus that investment not just on spending more money, on seeing real results. What we need to see is local government doing their job, and it's not a way to scapegoat county supervisors, city administrators, or council members or mayors, but all across the state this is a problem, and we need to see demonstrable evidence that local government is doing everything they can to address it.
And do you think that's happening?
I think that a lot has been happening, but not at the scale and not with the sense of urgency that is required of this moment. And I want to make this crystal clear that in no way, shape, or form suggests that your mayor or your supervisors aren't doing extraordinary work. In fact, the local electeds here were disproportionately responsible for that $1 billion investment that we provided in the budget this year.
I want to talk about the issue, another issue that we talked about before, which is the issue of foster care. Yeah. This is something that is being added to your budget. It's something that's personal for you. Yeah. You grew up in that system. Yeah. Why does foster care funding on a state level, why is that something that should be important?
It's needed because we're just not doing enough. Local government's not doing enough. Nonprofits are struggling, and the magnitude of the problem is getting worse and worse. Look, we know that individuals desperately need someone who gives a damn about them, that cares about them. That's the most determinative thing in terms of the course of their life, at least moving in the right direction. And we just don't have a system that adequately supports our foster youth. And what ends up being a foster problem today is your homeless problem tomorrow, is your criminal justice problem 10 years from now. And so we have a moral responsibility and ethical one, and these are good kids that just need support, need mentorship, need resources.
And your mother did this too?
As a mom, we were a foster family growing up. My high school years had a number of different foster brothers come in and out, and we supported the foster system ever since. I tried as mayor to reform our system. I felt like I didn't do enough, and so as governor, I don't want to look back and say we didn't do enough, and so I'm trying trying anew with a sense of urgency.
And I always like to ask one fun question. It seems like we're in Nostalgia Fest right now. Beverly Hills 90210, back on the air on Fox.
It is. I do know this.
Are you a fan? Are you excited?
I'm overwhelmed by the prospect that I'm going to have a chance to renew my childhood, the vestige of my childhood.
Awesome.
I can't wait.
He represents every part. Beverly Hills 90210, every other zip code, right?
Yeah. What am I going to say about this?
Well, 3 more huge 90210 fans join our show next. Areva Martin, John Thomas, and Stuttering John Melendez. Stay with us. More after this.
From Southern California to the Bay Area, you're watching The Issue Is.
It's one thing to pass a law, it's another to implement it because of the arguments from the other side that constantly need to be batted down. Gun safety, gun control measures save lives. It's a fact, and the data bears that out.
The governor of California talking guns moments ago right here on The Issue Is he right? Let's talk about that and more with our panel this week. All of them returning favorites. Areva Martin is an attorney, activist, talk show host, philanthropist, and author. I'm exhausted. Her latest book is Make It Rain, How to Use the Media to Revolutionize Your Business and Brand. John Thomas is founder and president of Thomas Partner Strategies. He's a Republican strategist, an ad man. He's the chief political analyst for KFI AM 640 and the host of his own podcast called The Thomas Guide, available now. Stuttering John Melendez is host of the Stuttering John podcast. He writes about his roles on The Howard Stern Show and The Tonight Show with Jay Leno in his book. It is called Easy for You to Say. The book is heartfelt and hilarious. Welcome back, all of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Guns, obviously the big debate this week, and the big question, Areva, what do we do now?
Well, what we do is we do something. I think the American public has made it very clear that we are so sick and tired and so frustrated with the inactivity. I'm a mom, so when Sandy Hook happened, when that mass shooting, I could not imagine that we weren't going to pass a universal bipartisan background check law, and we didn't. And since Sandy Hook, we can just count, and that Time magazine cover shows us all the mass shootings we've had to date. And I'm really frustrated when I hear Mitch McConnell say, I'm not going to call the senators back to take any action. It'll take too long for them to get back. We'll just let them enjoy their summer. The American people want action, and we want it now. We want universal background checks, and we want to address the whole issue of assault weapons and these large magazines that are used to kill hundreds of people at a time.
John, help explain for us the political calculus here. You do this for a living. I do. Background checks, 90% plus approval ratings in polls, and yet the Republicans won't bring it up. Why is that?
Well, it's because first of all, on a presidential level, it's because a lot of these key states that decide the election are staunchly, pro-gun and anti-gun control. So it's political suicide in that case. Look, you also look at a more granular level at senators, members of Congress that could be swing votes. Their districts do not want these gun control laws. They're very pro-gun and see it as a slippery slope.
But background checks, is that being anti-gun? I mean, don't a lot of gun owners support the idea of background checks?
Some do, but then when you start playing out the messaging sequence, the logical thing is you may trust, if you're a Republican, you may trust Trump and his administration with you on a list, but you may not trust the next Democrat in the White House with your name on a list. Look, in LA City, the amount and the length that they've gone of gun control measures have only made it more difficult for people like me, law-abiding citizens, to protect ourselves. If you look at, for instance, assault rifles were invented in the 1960s. Why is it that it's a relatively recent phenomenon that we have these huge mass shootings, yet assault rifles have been around since the 60s? I think we have to look at the bigger problem and go, why are we having this issue? And is there something bigger that we can address?
But that's the argument that we can't do two things at the same time. We can do exactly what you just said, John. We can look at the bigger issue. We can look at gun violence as a health crisis, which I think we should be doing in this country. And at the same time, we can enact smart and reasonable gun control laws. There's nothing that prevents us from doing both at the same time.
You're assuming that I agree that those laws would stop these shootings from happening, and I don't think they would. Criminals will find a way, whether you have longer wait times. Okay, a lot of these mass shootings are well planned out. The Vegas shooter put together his arsenal over a year's period of time. So what are you going to do?
John, what do you think?
I think that there are 4 things that need to be done. First of all, the ban on assault weapons. Even the inventor of the AR-15 said it was never intended for civilian use, ever. Okay, that's one thing. Lesser mags. We don't need 40-round mags on a gun. If you're going to go hunting, you don't need it. And if you want to protect your home, if you're that bad of, if you're that bad of a shot that needs 40-round mags, then you know what?
You're in trouble anyhow.
Yeah, you're in trouble anyhow. Hold on. I didn't finish yet. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. And then also, you know,
you're blowing this out of proportion.
Definitely stricter background checks. Hold on, I'll let you speak without interrupting. You can give me this amount of respect. And then fourthly, I think the parents who own these guns, if their kids get in possession of that gun, these parents should be held equally as responsible.
Well, they are.
Thank you.
They are. If somebody steals my gun and hurts somebody, I am criminally liable. I'll use an example, John. In LA City, they took on a handgun capacity magazine from 12 rounds down to 7. People go, what do you need 12 rounds for? Do you know how hard it is to hit a target when your adrenaline shaking and somebody breaks into your home with 7 rounds? And they want to reduce it even more. And that's the problem I've got, John, is my public safety is being jeopardized, by the way, with criminals who may not pay attention because they may not.
That is a losing argument. 90% of Americans, we are sick and tired of watching our kids be slaughtered. I'm sick and tired of kids saying they're afraid to go to school because some mass shooter may walk into the school.
And there are other solutions than that. So there are more solutions than that restricting my rights.
How about a shotgun? If you can't hit a guy with a shotgun with one shot, that the thing goes out this big, then you really should not own a gun in the first place.
John Thomas, so what is the solution?
For school shootings?
For all these shootings, these mass shootings, how do we stop this?
First of all, for school, you have to take it case by case. For school shootings, there's some good initiatives going on in Upper New York right now where you put school safety officers in schools with guns that deter it from happening. So that's number one. The other is, look, we've got a mental... it sounds contrite, but we do have a mental health crisis going on. We have to address that, okay? Then the other is we have to talk about the fact that kids these days are practicing mass shootings every single day, killing thousands of people in a video game environment. We have to just analyze of what we're putting forth as a society. And then, of course, the destruction of the family unit is also a problem. We have to address that.
These are just Trump talking points. I'm so sick of people
It's not Trump talking points, Areva.
All the studies show that people with mental illness are much more likely to injure themselves than to injure other people. And it's just not fair to continue to try to label this as a mental health issue when there's so many bigger issues. And we got to get these guns. And your solution to school shootings is to put more guns in the school.
Yeah,
so now we want to arm teachers. We want to arm the cafeteria worker with guns. That is a ridiculous
safety.
Well,
the biggest person with...
We've had police safety officers in school. We had that in Parkland, and look what happened. All those kids were still murdered. You have to address the issue of the number of guns on the street, the type of weapons that John is talking about. We have to get those guns off the street.
The biggest person with a mental health issue is our president, okay? And he's the one who's inciting a lot of... You have to admit this, John. He's inciting a lot of this violence.
I don't
You don't even believe that his...
No, I actually don't. No.
His ethnic...
Well, a man in Montana, John, just body slammed a 13-year-old and said he did it because the president was speaking directly to the shooter.
John Thomas, last word.
I think the shooter in Ohio is a staunch Elizabeth Warren fan. So
okay, how about the shooter in El Paso who didn't like the Mexicans?
Okay,
he just came out with that. I'm just saying.
You can shift blame if you want, but this is not a Trump phenomenon. We've had these pre-Trump. So if you want to blame this president, if it was the first time if it ever happened, if it was the first time it ever happened in this president's watch, I could give your argument credence. But I don't think I can because it's not a new thing.
Mitch McConnell has 4 pieces of legislation right now on his desk, and he has still not brought it to the floor. Why not? And he's on hiatus now. So let's wait till September now. Who cares if there's more mass shootings? Isn't that irresponsible?
That's not what he's saying. No.
What is he saying?
You're assuming that these laws, like red flag laws, others work. There's plenty of there's plenty of studies. There's plenty of arguments to show that the only thing it does is perhaps address people trying to commit suicide, but it doesn't actually reduce mass shootings.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. One of the big questions many people have about gun control is what's going on. Similar questions could be asked about homelessness. We're going to go to Skid Row with Bernie Sanders when we come back.
That was fun. I love these light-flushing topics for
Yeah. The issue is homelessness and what to do next. This week, we walked the streets of LA's Skid Row with Senator Bernie Sanders and asked him about it.
It is painful to know that we are the wealthiest country on earth, and there are people a few feet away from us here who are sleeping out on the street.
When Governor Newsom made an announcement about legal aid, he literally had to drive past tents to get into that building. There are literally tents right outside this building. What goes through your mind when you drive through the streets of Los Angeles and so many other cities and you see those tents?
Yeah, Los Angeles, Fresno, Bakersfield, give me a city. It's a disgrace, and we own it. We got to own it. Got to own it.
Back with our panel now. Stuttering John, Melendez, John Thomas, Areva Martin. Stuttering John, we'll start with you.
Well, it was so sad seeing, Skid Row in those tents, from Youth Gone Wild to 18 in Life, and now they're homeless. I knew it was Sebastian Bach on the corner asking for money on the 101. Forget it. You don't know if you get that, Elex. Okay. No, yeah, it's a horrible thing. I think we should buy every homeless person a house. Why do I say this? Because I'm also a realtor and I want to be their broker.
Oh my God. Okay, John.
I am a licensed realtor in case you need a house.
Other thoughts on the solutions other than lining John's pockets?
Well, this is a huge problem, and I think it also dovetails with the cost of housing as well in California. And so the problem is, I think the approach certainly, I think Orange County's actually made some strides of reducing the population and dealing with the situation. But in LA City and LA County, for instance, the numbers are skyrocketing. We've spent more money, yet the numbers continue to grow. And so I feel like part of it is we need to be better at how we spend the money, but also we have to figure out ways to reduce costs of living so that these families have housing options and they don't have to live on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that the governor was talking about this week is that there's one affordable housing complex where it costs $500,000 just to build a unit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we're seeing that in a lot of different places.
Yeah, I'm really encouraged, though, by some of the things that I'm seeing from the leaders that are really at work on the issue of homelessness. The governor appointed Supervisor Margaret Lee Thomas and Mayor Darrell Steinberg to become like the housing czars under his administration. And I just read an article that they co-wrote, and it talks about the right to housing. And there's this fundamental right that homeless people have to have housing. And I hope that the advocates and the leaders in the state of California start to look at that very seriously, because I think, again, we can do two things at the same time. We can build affordable housing while we can also address the immediate needs that people have, because literally people are dying on the streets of Los Angeles because of, living with rats and roaches crawling over their faces and in tents. So I think we've got to address getting people off the streets immediately, giving them a safe place while we build affordable housing, and address this whole income inequality, which we can't escape in a state like California.
But don't some of the liberals bear some responsibility for this? I mean, Democrats are in control of basically every aspect of government in California, and it's worse here than pretty much anywhere else.
Well, I think it's completely unfair to suggest that this homeless issue is just a California issue. Homelessness is a growing issue across the country and in states that are controlled. The state legislatures are controlled by Republicans. So I don't think we can lay this at the feet of Democrats or liberals. This is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue. And if we're going to address it, it's going to take bipartisan leadership.
Here's the problem: is the cost of housing to build the same house in Texas or others literally costs $500,000 more for the same materials, same everything in California. Why is that? It's our regulation, our CEQA structure. We have to change that so that we can reduce it, so that home builders can build for not just low-income housing, but affordable housing. The fact is, most young people are never going to be able to buy a home at this. They're never going to be able to afford it. So a lot of young people are like 1 to 2 paychecks away from living on the street. And until we, guess what, reduce our sales taxes. It's not just the cost of housing. It's all the gas taxes we just passed.
The gas tax.
But hold on.
Also, if you
hold
talk
on.
about regulations, we also have to talk about the structure.
The gas tax that the state.
1% of this country makes more than the gas tax.
The gas tax that the Democrats just passed does not hurt people like me that have a good living. It hurts people that commute from Rancho Cucamonga into LA that cannot. So these policies that are passed by Democrats are disproportionately hurting the families that can afford it the least.
And that's the Republican talking point. Let's talk about the enormous gap
in
That's
income
the
in this
policy,
country.
Areva.
Well, let's talk about the enormous economic gap in this country. We can't get away from that. That the 1% of this country owns all of the wealth in this country. What about, is that regulation? Is it regulation? These corporate profits that insurance companies and banks, that's not regulation.
On topic of the gas tax, though, itself, I mean, how do you pay to fix all the roads, though? I mean, the people of California passed that for a reason.
Well, it's because they were sold puppies and kittens in the ads. I think if they actually knew that they had an opportunity to repeal the gas tax, polling showed that they would have by 60-40 margin.
But they didn't.
Well, they did. You're right.
It was on the ballot. They didn't.
Yes, but it was not worded to repeal the gas tax. When we tested the proper language,
that's just an excuse.
No, it's actually.
You're
I've
not
actually
giving
done
voters credit for being intelligent and smart.
Actually,
we knew what we had an opportunity to vote for. We didn't vote for.
I've actually done tons of research on that.
Don't say that we weren't smart enough to understand what we were voting for.
But the point is, we have to invest in infrastructure, but it's called moving money from other buckets to fix.
Yeah, from those corporate profit buffets.
Okay. All right. Another big headline this week. What happened in Orange County? We now have more registered Democrats in Orange County than Republicans. Used to be a stronghold. When I was at that event about homelessness, we talked with Congresswoman Katie Porter about this as well. Here's what she had to say.
Elections matter. Engaging people matters. We knocked on doors. We had conversations. We had folks like the governor and others coming to talk about what was at stake in this election. And so the more that we get families engaged, the more families believe that what happens in government matters in their lives, the more they're going to make their voices heard, and the better and stronger government gets. So I think it's giving people a real sense.
Stuttering John, what do you think of this? A big change in the makeup of California.
I think it's a great change to have more Democrats. I mean, who needs like this?
There weren't enough as it is.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
got to get through her.
And I love that we passed that you got to, show your tax returns. Let me ask you a question about that. Okay. Donald Trump said he couldn't show his tax returns a long time ago because he was involved in an audit. The audit can't still be going on. Why won't he release the tax? What is he afraid of?
You'd have to ask him that.
No, I'm asking you.
The point is,
you seem to do a lot of research.
Look, hold on. If this is a great issue, take it to the ballot box and vote him out. But don't try to suppress.
Well, Donald Trump is suing California
Don't try to suppress the Republican vote in the state of California by disallowing him. By the way, it's going to get kicked off the lawsuit's going to get.
But I'm saying, why? But what does he have to hide besides his dealings with Moscow?
You'd have to ask him. I don't know the answer.
And can I just ask you this? When you repeal the gas tax in California, can you also increase the minimum wage? Because we could address this housing crisis a lot better if people could earn a living wage. We can't even get the federal government to increase the minimum wage. It's like $7.50 has been that way forever. So we can give people dignity and work and give them the money that they need to pay for housing, and we could start to address this housing crisis.
If you want to expedite the automation of fast food workers to robots and machines, that's fine. I lived in downtown LA when LA passed the minimum wage increase. I remember literally a week after they passed that, all of the Joe's parking lot attendants disappeared, and there were automated machines there instead of parking lot. So you're okay killing those jobs, Areva. That's the issue.
We transfer those people from those low-paying jobs anyhow, because I want to grow up to get parking tickets at Joe's, and we give them the skills that they need in order to work in the new created jobs that are automated.
These parking lot attendants oftentimes are feeding their families, and without that job, Areva,
and so they want to keep making 12. They want to keep making $10 an hour.
Stuttering John, last word to you.
I'm saying, so by raising the minimum wage is going to make them have automated systems which will put them out of work, right? So in other words, let's not give them any more money because because then we're going to have a machine do their job.
No, it's just that certain jobs don't warrant certain levels of compensation, so it expedites automation. So you're hurting all of it. It's a job killer.
I just know that John doesn't want to end this conversation saying he supports people making $7.50 an hour. I'm going to give you credit for being bigger than that.
Thank you, Areva.
We're going to leave it there.
That credit.
At some point, we had to call timeout, so we're going to leave it there. We encourage you to check out our podcast. Just search for The Issue Is wherever you stream. Our newest podcast is with John Thomas, talking about why he's a Republican, how he got involved in politics, and really sort of smart insight into how politics is really made these days. I learned a lot. And in our archives, we've got a lengthy sit-down with Areva Martin. Talks about breaking barriers, leading the way in autism activism, and we've passed it down with Stuttering John. If you want to know what Howard Stern, Jay Leno are really like behind the scenes, again, search for The Issue Is. We'll be right back. Quite a picture they found there of you.
Nice glamour shot.
I can't believe
that was a great.
So some on the left are calling for the boycott of Equinox and SoulCycle after the owner hosted a fundraiser for President Trump. Meanwhile, some on the right are calling for a impeachment of Congressman Joaquin Castro after he published the names of people that support President Trump. So is all this just too much? What is the correct way to protest in America right now? Back with our panel, Areva Martin, John Thomas, Stuttering John Melendez. What do you make of all this?
Well, I'm an avid Soul Cycle member, have been. I've been, but I was disturbed by it. I was very disturbed by it. And I think the response from the CEO really disturbed me even more, because there was this comment made about, Stephen Ross being just a passive investor rather than coming out and just owning the issue. And I think people need to know, what the corporate people that make all the money, the corporate profits, tiers, the politics they're involved in, and we get to make a choice. Do we want to support something or not support it? I think we have a right to know that.
But if Stuttering John, isn't there sort of a right to make that legal contribution, and Joaquin Castro has the legal right to make those announcements?
But it's kind of like ironic, judging about how fat our president is, that it's a gym that's supporting him. But everybody has look. I don't go to Chick-fil-A anymore because they came out against same-sex marriage. So I just stopped eating it. That's a silent protest.
Yeah.
But it's okay to protest. A lot of people are protesting Donald Trump, right now.
Yeah.
And it's getting bad when the loudest protester is Melania.
John, what do you think?
Yeah, you have the right to protest with an economic vote. I think that's perfectly reasonable and fine. I think, should we impeach Castro? No, but I don't think it's appropriate to put these private donors on his Twitter account. And it's not just saying, oh, you support the president. It's the rhetoric that comes with it. It's saying you by extension are a bad, evil human being. You are racist by extension. Because there are a lot of crazies out there. And these people are private citizens. Don't put them on blast in that sense.
Isn't that publicly available data that anybody can search?
Alex, it's a totally different animal for me to go into the bowels of the FEC's website to find that versus a popular Twitter account and associate the words racism, evil human beings. That's a different animal altogether.
First Amendment right. He has the absolute right to voice his opinion.
He does have the right, but just because he has the right doesn't mean he should.
No, but he has the right to do it, and that's in his discretion. And his voters in his district will either support him for what he's doing, or, as you said, they'll use their vote to vote
I agree,
him out of
but I don't think that's the proper way to do it.
And speaking of voters judging things, Joe Biden, right now the Democratic frontrunner, made another gaffe this week. Here it is.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids. No, I really mean it, but think how we think about it.
So that didn't go so well. But yet he's the front runner, especially with black voters. Check this out. We want to show you a poll from Quinnipiac University. It shows they're standing with African-American voters right now. Joe Biden at 47%, Elizabeth Warren at 8%, Kamala Harris at 1%. What do you make of that?
Ask the black woman on the panel.
As a supporter of Kamala Harris, I
just had to do that because I'm working on my stand-up.
Yeah. Obviously, I have.
But here's the deal. Polls are like roller coasters. They go up, they go down. After a good debate performance, we saw Kamala Harris's, poll numbers shoot up really high. After the last poll, Biden, the pundit said that he held his own. He did well, so his poll numbers went up. What we do know is that African-American voters are giving more money, more financial donations to both the Harris campaign and the Cory Booker campaign. And I believe ultimately, as the race continues and Harris continues her great debate performances, as she continues to, talk to voters across this country, that we'll see those numbers increase.
And in our Issue Is podcast, you explain why you think Harris will go up a lot with African-Americans.
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable. I think it's really just a reflection of low name recognition at this point. She is going to grow. She can speak to that community with credibility. However, I think she will have some problems as Booker and others contrast her with some of her things that she's done with marijuana prosecutions and others. But look, inevitably, she's not going to be at 1%. Yeah. And the thing is that Biden is going to be hemorrhaging that support. So his 47 is going to go to other candidates.
And last word, John, what do you make of the Biden blunder?
Well, poor kids are as smart as white kids. Well, all I'm going to say is, and all of those kids are smarter than Joe Biden. But no, but I support Joe Biden. But it's a gaffe. And it's not nearly as bad, John, you have to admit, as saying that we conquered the airports in the Revolutionary War, okay? All right?
But here's the issue. Elex said it was another gaffe, and that's the concern, is how many of these can he sustain?
Well, how many can Trump do?
Our president has like 1,200 a day.
I know.
Because the question here has Biden lost his fastball in enough that he can defeat Trump in a general election?
Well, the numbers show that not only can Biden, but Harris and Warren and so many of the top Democratic candidates can beat Trump in a general election.
Well, we didn't have a whole lot of unity on this show, but I do want to bring us together with some music. So cue that, because this is from perhaps the greatest album of all time, possibly, Abbey Road. That picture, of course, 50 years ago this week. So everybody loves that. Everybody taking that picture. Hopefully nobody getting hit by traffic. And what an amazing thing. We all love this song, right?
Yes, yes. And that whole picture, you know, with John, Paul, and George was, they were trying to, like, say that Paul was dead. That's why Paul is smoking a cigarette and he's barefooted. The whole thing was like, George was the grave digger. John was all dressed in a white suit because he was given the eulogy. Did you know that? The whole thing was a whole scam on the Paul is dead thing.
Wow.
Yeah, because it gained a lot of steam after Sergeant Pepper's. Wow. Sorry, I'm like a pedologist. No, I do a lot of research. I do a lot of research.
Yeah.
Important stuff too, John.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time for more of The Issue Is.
I got your name.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Yeah, in fact, at the end of Strawberry Fields, you'll hear John go, I very tall. And